You've seen the footage. A fishing boat somewhere in the North Pacific. Walls of black water rising higher than the wheelhouse. The deck tilts hard to one side. 30 degrees, 40 degrees. Sometimes a full 45 until the rail disappears completely under the sea. Then the whole boat swings back the other way and does it again, all night long. And down below, in a bunk barely bigger than a coffin, a man is fast asleep. Not pretending, not lying there white-knuckled, gripping the frame and praying for morning. Asleep. Deep, dead to the world, asleep, while 80 tons of steel pitches and rolls beneath him in a force 9 gale. Here's the thing most people never even consider. That man chose this. He could be on dry land tonight. Nobody is forcing him to be 200 miles offshore in the worst weather of the year. He's out there on purpose, and he's sleeping better than you do in your bedroom. There are 3 layers to this story. The first explains why they don't just turn around and go home. The second reveals the design that makes sleep possible at all, and the third is something almost nobody expects. By the end of this video, you'll never look at a fishing boat the same way again. So, let's start with the obvious question. The storm is coming. Why don't they just run for shore? It seems simple. Point the bow at the coast and go, but that instinct, the one almost everyone has, is exactly the instinct that gets boats sunk. Because here's a fact that sounds backwards until you understand it. In a serious storm, the open ocean is the safest place to be. The coast is where boats die. Out in deep water, a wave is a smooth rolling hill. The boat rides up one side and down the other. But near land, that same wave hits the shallows, stands up, and breaks. A breaking wave doesn't lift a boat, it drops tons of solid water straight down onto the deck. Add rocks, reefs, and a narrow harbor entrance, and you've turned a survivable night into a death trap. Fishermen call the safe space around them sea room. And the first rule of bad weather is simple. Keep your sea room, stay away from anything you can hit. So, running for the coast isn't the safe choice. It's often the deadly one. And then there's the money. A commercial fishing trip isn't a day out. A boat heading to the Bering Sea might steam 2 or 3 days just to reach the grounds, burning thousands of dollars in fuel to get there. The seasons are short, sometimes just a few weeks, sometimes a few days. Every hour on the water is the only chance to earn for the entire year. Turning back at the first sign of weather means burning all that fuel, all that time, and coming home with an empty hold. So they don't turn back. They prepare to ride it out. And to ride it out, every single person on board has to sleep, even while the boat is trying to throw them across the cabin. Which brings us to the part most people never think about. How do you build a bed that works at 45 degrees? Here's what surprises people first. The fanciest fix is also the oldest. For centuries, the finest ships solved this with something called a gimbal. A gimbal is a pivoting mount. The boat tips, but the thing hanging inside it stays level. Old sailing captains slept in gimbaled beds that swung free while the whole world tilted around them. You've seen the same trick on every gas stove on every boat ever built. The flame stays flat while the galley rolls. But a gimbaled bunk for every crew member is expensive, heavy, and takes up space a working boat doesn't have. So modern fishing boats use something far simpler and far cheaper. It costs about as much as a bed sheet, and it's the single most important piece of sleeping equipment on the entire vessel. It's called a lee cloth. A lee cloth is a strip of heavy canvas attached to the open side of the bunk. When it's down, you climb in. When it's up, it's lashed to the ceiling, forming a wall that turns your bed into a shallow fabric box. The boat rolls, gravity tries to dump you out. The lee cloth catches you and holds you against the mattress. It does not look like much, it looks like laundry, but without it, sleeping in a rolling boat would be physically impossible because you'd spend the whole night on the floor. Then there's the part the engineers got right before the crew ever stepped aboard, and it comes down to one question: where do you put the beds? Think about a seesaw. The ends fly up and down. The middle barely moves. A boat works the same way. It rolls around a center line that runs down its length, and the closer you are to that line, the less motion you feel. So, on a well-designed fishing boat, the bunks are placed low and near the center, down by the waterline, tucked toward the middle of the hull. Up in the bow, the motion is violent enough to launch you into the air. Down in the right bunk, that same 45-degree roll feels like a slow, heavy sway. Same storm, completely different ride. The naval architect decided how well that crew would sleep years before the boat was ever built. But none of this answers the real question. Even held in place, even in the calmest bunk on the boat, you're still being thrown side to side all night long. So, why doesn't that keep them awake? Here's where the story takes a turn nobody expects. Picture it. You're 3 days into a trip. The barometer is dropping, the wind is screaming through the rigging, and the boat is rolling so hard the coffee cups are flying off the table. You crawl into your bunk, pull up the lee cloth, and you're out in 90 seconds. Meanwhile, somebody on their first trip is lying in the next bunk, eyes wide open, stomach in their throat, certain they're about to die. Same boat, same storm. The difference is the body. Here's what actually happens. Deep in your inner ear sits a tiny system of fluid-filled tubes that tracks every movement of your head. On land, it expects the ground to hold still. The first day at sea, it panics. Constant motion, no solid reference, and the brain reads the mismatch as poison. That's seasickness, but the brain adapts fast. Within about 3 days, it rewrites its own expectations. Motion becomes the new normal. Fishermen have a name for it. Getting your sea legs. Once you have them, the rolling isn't a threat anymore. It's just the background. And the brain stops fighting it. But it gets stranger than that because the rocking doesn't just become tolerable. It actively helps. Sleep scientists have tested this in labs with beds built to sway gently back and forth. The results were clear. People fell asleep faster, they dropped into deep sleep quicker, and they stayed there longer. The slow rhythmic motion synchronizes the brain's own sleep waves and pulls you under. It's the exact same reason we rock babies and put them in cradles. We've known the trick for thousands of years. The fisherman in that storm isn't fighting the motion of the boat. The motion is rocking him to sleep. So you've got a body that's adapted, a bunk built in the calmest spot on the boat, a lee cloth holding you in place, and an ancient instinct that turns the roll of the sea into the deepest sleep of your life. And that's the part that stops people cold. Ask a fisherman about a wild night offshore, riding out a gale in a warm bunk while the ocean threw itself at the hull, and a lot of them won't describe it as misery. They'll describe it as the best sleep they ever got. No phones, no traffic, no alarm but the next watch. Just the deep rolling rhythm of the sea and the hum of the engine somewhere below. The most extreme conditions don't always produce the worst nights. Sometimes they produce the most unforgettable ones. So the next time you see footage of a fishing boat buried in a storm and you think about how terrifying it must be, remember the man asleep below deck. He's not suffering, he's prepared, he's exactly where he means to be, and he's sleeping better than you are. Now, I want to hear from you. What's the roughest water you've ever been on, and did you sleep or stay up all night? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If you learned something today, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and I'll see you on the next one.